economic alarms are blaring. The Fed is trying to stop inflation.
To those who point to the Fed and say you ran it too hot, you say what?
With the benefit of hindsight, I wish we had tightened sooner.
Higher interest rates will bring down inflation. They will also bring some pain to households.
We're now heading into what will be a new economic era.
It really is difficult to overstate how important this story is and how much it matters.
Did you hear about the upcoming financial crisis? If you think this might be similar to the 2008 recession, then we have something more to spill. What can we do to stay afloat during this period? Well, tag along to find out. The 2008 recession was a nightmare. It, in fact, took the entire world by storm and many sectors had to shut down. Bankruptcy was literally a common word back then. Over years, whenever a financial crisis warning pops up, every entrepreneur and investor had the tendency to relate it to the 2008 recession. And with that, we are here to know what's the big deal about March 2024 anyway. The US banking system has been leaning on a crutch called the Bank Term Funding Program. It's been their safety net for a whole year. The party's about to end on March 11th, and that really is a warning, and we are in for a dark time where money has to be spent and invested wisely. It's just like what happened with those regional banks like Signature Silvergate and Silicon Valley. They hit rock bottom. It turns out their loyal customers, mainly tech or crypto businesses, started staging a mass exodus, withdrawing their deposits. Can't blame them though. Those losses weren't going to cover themselves. Meanwhile, savvy savers out there sniffed out better deals elsewhere, leaving these banks feeling like yesterday's news. Fast forward to today and experts are waving red flags, warning us that similar storms are brewing on the horizon for 2024. Profitability took a nosedive. Balance sheets were a disaster, and the same goes for their value of their government bond holdings. Silvergate was the first to hit the skids, but Silicon Valley's dramatic collapse on March 10, 2023 took the cake. When Silicon Valley Bank raised the white flag, it set off a frenzy of a bank run like no other. The scene where there were panicked investors scrambling to jump ship wasn't exactly a pretty picture. And why the panic? Well, Silicon Valley Bank found itself in a bind, desperately needing to raise capital after taking a hit selling bonds at a loss. Now, fast forward to today. The big question on everyone's mind is what's in store for US banks this year? Well, with the Bank Term Funding Program, or BTFP, bidding farewell on March 11th, the Federal Reserve, these financial superheroes swooped in to save the day, putting an end to the panic by offering United States banks a lifeline. By allowing them to borrow from central bank using their bonds as collateral. The genius move not only gave banks access to much needed funding, but it also worked some magic on those bonds. By pricing the bonds at their original face value instead of their market value, the Fed effectively hit the reset button, and suddenly the dreaded interest rate rise became a thing of the past. And the bank balance sheets were reinflated faster than you could say financial wizardry. However, as with any good story, there's always a twist. Despite the Fed's heroic efforts, one bank found itself sinking deeper into troubled waters. San Francisco's First Republic Bank, unfortunately, missed the boat on this life-saving opportunity. The closure of the BTFP might just spell trouble for banks' borrowing costs. Say goodbye to those fat profit margins because things are about to get a little tighter in the financial department. According to the latest reports, New York Community Bank shares have plummeted a staggering 45%, hitting fresh 30-year lows. As the dust settles and the curtains close on March 11, 2024, one thing's for sure, the financial landscape will never be the same again. Will our banks weather the storm, or are we in for a wild ride? Now, let's cut through the noise and get down to brass tacks. Amidst all this chaos swirling around New York Community Bank, one thing's for certain, there are no guarantees in this high-stakes game, because we're about to dive into the heart of the matter. As we sift through the wreckage, it's hard to ignore the harsh reality staring us in the face. New York Community's bank stock price has just taken a nosedive of epic proportions, plummeting a staggering 80% since January. Just a few months ago, their shares were fetching over $10 a pop. Fast forward to today and they're barely scraping the bottom of the barrel, trading for less than $2. But why is New York Community Bank suddenly finding itself in the eye of the storm? Well, analysts have been quick to point fingers at the deteriorating quality of its commercial real estate loans. As the dust settles and the smoke clears, one thing's for certain, New York Community Bank is facing an uphill battle like never before. Will they weather the storm and emerge stronger on the other side, or are we witnessing the beginning of the end? With every passing day, the signs are becoming harder to ignore. Commercial real estate is in dire straits, and even the big guns like billionaire real estate investor Barry Sternley and Starwood Capital CEO are taking notice. In fact, Sternley recently made a chilling prediction, forecasting a $1 trillion bloodbath in US office properties. According to Bloomberg, more than $900 billion, or a whopping 20% plus of the total debt owned on US commercial multifamily real estate, is set to mature this year. Borrowers caught between a rock and a hard place may find themselves with no choice but to refinance their loans at sky-high interest rates, or they could sell their properties at a hefty discount. It's like a financial game of Russian roulette, with borrowers desperately trying to navigate the treacherous waters of the real estate market. Bloomberg recently dropped a bombshell report revealing that investors are giving banks with heavy exposure to commercial real estate the cold shoulder. With the financial markets teetering on the edge of a precipice, nobody wants to be left holding the bag when the music stops. According to recent reports, shares in New York community banks skyrocketed after the struggling lender announced a jaw-dropping $1 billion capital raise and ushered in new leadership. And if that wasn't enough to send shockwaves through the financial world, NYCB also sealed a deal with several investment firms, swapping equity in the regional bank for a much-needed lifeline. Hudson Bay Capital, Reverence Capital Partners, and Liberty Strategic Capital, led by none other than former U.S. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, have all thrown their hats into the ring. But will this star-studded lineup be enough to pull New York Community Bank from the brink of disaster? And New York Community Bank isn't alone in sinking the ship. Hundreds of other U.S. banks are treading water in similarly choppy seas. Just ask Kevin O'Leary of Shark Tank fame. He's convinced that we're headed for a banking apocalypse of epic proportions. Just imagine the thought of having thousands of US banks teetering on the edge of oblivion. It doesn't give us all a pretty picture. The ship has already set sail and it's much further along than most Americans realize. Just ask Putin, who hit the nail on the head in his recent interview with Tucker Carlson. The US is single-handedly dismantling the dollar with its own two hands. As of this moment, the amount of US treasuries floating around is less than $26 trillion. But just a short while ago, that number was a staggering $30 trillion. So, where did that extra $4 trillion disappear? The answer is simple. They dumped it. That's right, the biggest foreign holders of these treasuries, Japan, China, Saudi Arabia, and the United Kingdom, are selling them off like there's no tomorrow. China, our friendly neighborhood economic powerhouse, is leading the charge, offloading US treasuries like they're going out of style. And if that wasn't enough to send shockwaves through the financial world, they're ramping up massive stimulus efforts to prop up their crumbling economy. According to the latest data, China has slashed its US Treasury holdings by a jaw-dropping 15%, the lowest it's been in 2 decades. And if they were to dump them all at once, well, let's just say it wouldn't be pretty. In fact, it would send shockwaves through Congress, prompting Janet Yellen to scramble for a contingency plan. Things are about to get rocky. Experts predict that right after March 11th, all hell could break loose. Powell may have no choice but to raise rates to starve off a crisis. If rates go up, small banks holding onto those risky commercial real estate loans could come crashing down. Rates go up, China dumps more treasuries, and the feds print more money. And the 1%, well, they're laughing all the way to the bank, while the rest of us are left holding the bag. So, what's your take on this? Do let us know in the comment section below. Also, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. Until next time, see you all.